Voremar Seafront Promenade, the coastal zone. The coast forms a boundary between two very distinct environments, the sea and the land. Within this zone, one can find terrestrial organisms adapted to the specific conditions of humidity, salinity, and wind, characteristic of the proximity to the sea, as well as marine organisms that are capable of withstanding periods of exposure to the air, and consequently, intense desiccation and insolation. In both cases, the sea is responsible for their existence. The degree of marine influence determines the distribution of the various living organisms along the coastal zone, from areas in contact with typical continental vegetation to the boundary with the depths of the marine slope. Thus, two distinct zones can be identified: a strip called the maritime zone, occupied by terrestrial organisms but adapted to the influence of the sea; a marine zone, where exclusively marine organisms live, including those that are occasionally or periodically exposed above water to the air. In the Illeta marine zone, vegetation is distributed according to a gradient of salinity, creating distinct bands of plant life. The first band is characterized by a rocky substrate that is frequently splashed, and even submerged, by the sea. Under these conditions, very few species are able to thrive, with sea fennel, Crithmum maritime, being the common element along the entire rocky Mediterranean coastline. Sea fennel typically appears alongside some species of sea lavender, Limonium, which marks the biogeographical differences. In addition to this community of sea fennel, ephemeral annual communities develop, colonizing the small ledges and depressions of the cliffed coastline. The next band of vegetation is dominated by perennial species that form time-dominated scrubs and scrublands, similar to those found in continental areas but also including species typical of coastal environments, such as sea daisy, Asteriscus maritimus. It is also common to find populations of broom, spartium, and albadine, Ligium spartum. The species that colonize the cliffed areas must endure both the direct and indirect effects of proximity to the sea, including the wind, water, and salt, and the specific characteristics of rocky zones. In such environments, two groups of plants can be distinguished: those that withstand the direct splashing of the waves and grow on relatively horizontal surfaces, and those species situated at higher altitudes, where they are not subjected to the direct effects of wave splash. For one reason or another, most of the plants that colonize the cliffs exhibit some form of adaptation, whether morphological, reproductive, or physiological. One example of this is cushion growth, which is a response to the environmental conditions. With this geometric shape, the sphere has the greatest volume for the smallest surface area. The species aim to expose the minimum surface area in order to protect themselves from the cold during winter, the strong winds laden with salt, and the intense summer radiation, while preventing water loss. Species such as Crithmum maritimum and Asteriscus maritimus exhibit this type of adaptation. Additionally, we find strong root systems that allow the plants to penetrate crevices, providing greater opportunities for anchorage and access to the scarce water and nutrients. The limiting factors inherent in coastal environments, particularly in cliffed coastal areas, promote speciation and, consequently, the emergence of endemic species with restricted ranges. El Campeo Tourism, collaborating with the Archaeological Museum of Alicante and the Institute of Coastal Ecology.